Friends, Winnipeg has just finished defeating the Anaheim Ducks and currently sits with a nice 10-4-1 record. Good currently for second in the Central Division as the Dallas Stars have played a couple more games, so the Jets are a little bit behind in their schedule. But throughout the past couple of weeks, we have seen that even with the strong record, the Jets could use a little bit of forward help. There are some decent candidates that I think the Jets might investigate, and we'll talk about what players Winnipeg could potentially be after, plus some bigger fish, on tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets.
You're Locked On the Hockey Jets, your daily podcast on the Winnipeg Jets. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, friends, and welcome to tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Harrison Lee, an avid Winnipeg Jets fan and an online blogger. You can follow me on Twitter at HLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. As always, thank you for making Locked On Jets your first listen of the day every day. If you like what you're hearing, be sure to like, follow, and subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform of choice, including Apple, Spotify, Google, Megaphone, Odyssey, and YouTube. Doing so is completely free of charge and ensures you never miss another episode. But most of all, we just really love and appreciate your support. Tonight's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, it's where the game starts. Now, like I said, obviously, the Jets have had a pretty good start to the season. Winnipeg is doing pretty well for itself, but, the Jets are probably looking to try and figure out how to make the most of this season in which the Central Division is on the weaker side. The Jets appear to be doing pretty okay and are really starting to figure things out at 5v5. Special teams, maybe a little bit of a mixed bag. The PK is awesome, or at least improving. I guess awesome relative to the last few years. Still has a lot of work to do, but it's a big improvement in certain areas in terms of where the Jets are conceding shots from, which could be helping Hellebuck. But obviously, up front, the Jets have a couple of holes. Ehlers definitely has been felt. His absence has been extremely noticeable on the way that the Jets play, both on the power play and at even strength. So the Jets need some forward help from somewhere, and there is a league out there just really, begging for defenders, especially quality ones or guys who have some sort of scoring potential. And even though Winnipeg's defense on the whole isn't great, this is still a team that has a number of players who would be very desirable for other squads looking to try and fortify their back ends. Now, I think the Jets could actually do some real damage on the trade market and significantly upgrade the team both for this season and beyond. One player that I've kind of been thinking about a little bit more than I normally would is Anthony Mantha from the Washington Capitals. Now, I live near DC, and I've seen a lot of the Capitals over the last few years, and obviously the Caps this year are they're in a really tough spot. I mean, this is a squad that is very much injured. It has like 4 or 5 guys who are currently out of their forward lineup. If anything, you would expect Washington to be buying forwards, but they have so many injuries that I don't even think it's really worth considering right now. And so if Washington continues on their current trend, I mean, they're in like 7th in the Metro Division, which for Washington is almost unthinkable, but this team already won the Cup. It's basically resigned to its fate, and I think the main thing that they're focusing on is trying to get Ovechkin to get past Gretzky's record. So, it might be time for them to start thinking about the big, R word, rebuild, right? This Caps team obviously won't want to rebuild while Ovechkin is here, but it may be a necessity with how many deals and contracts are set to expire after this year. In that vein, the Jets are kind of looking for a right winger. And Anthony Mantha, for me, seems like Winnipeg's best chance at acquiring a really good top 6 forward and could potentially offer a nice trade package for a guy who's got about a year and a half left on his deal. Now, from Winnipeg's perspective, Mantha brings a massive frame with a great shot, strong puck handling skill, a great inside cut towards the slot, and good spatial awareness that's also pretty decent in transition. Mantha seems to do everything offensively really well, and I think he would be one of Winnipeg's premier goal scorers alongside whichever center you pair him with. He can do well with just about anyone, and I would love to see him maybe paired with, either Shifley or Dubois, I think it could do some serious damage. And when you look at his cap hit, 5.7 million for the next 2 seasons is relatively reasonable. I mean, that's a very fair contract price. It's got a little bit of term for the Jets, an extra season to kind of work with. The one challenge with Mantha is, I think a lot of teams would be really interested in him, and the Caps are kind of one of those teams. I don't know that they would want to trade one of their best forward options, especially when they're still intent on trying to compete. And B, you look at the salary and he's being paid, I think around 6.5 million per season in real dollars, which the Jets don't really like deals that come saddled with those sorts of conditions. So I think Winnipeg, it would be a really hard fit. I think realistically, Dylan Strome might be the kind of player that's a little more expendable for the Caps. But then again, you look at their center depth and it's not great past Kuznetsov. Backstrom's still out. Then it's like Ehlers. You've got Strome in that mix. Dowd, Johansson. Most part, you're looking at middle six centers, not really guys who are sliding into your top six. So Dylan is kind of their best option at 2C right now, which means he probably isn't all that expendable. Mantha is kind of in the same boat, but he's also got a sizable cap hit. And I think if the Jets are serious about finding a guy who can help them with the next 2 seasons, including this one, where the Jets have, almost the entire team under contract, well, Mantha is a guy that you would probably offer a pretty decent sized package for. I'd imagine a first, a prospect, maybe 2 prospects, maybe a lower end roster player or something. I don't entirely know what it would look like, but I'm sure Washington will ask a pretty hefty price for Mantha if they were even trading him. I don't know that they are, but he does also have some injury concerns. So if the Caps are kind of worried that he's not going to be physically reliable enough for the team, maybe they let him get a fresh start somewhere else. He's been very productive over the past couple of seasons that he's been with the Caps, but that's when he's been healthy. And that would be a legitimate concern for the Jets. So I don't know if he is a great fit for the Jets, but it's certainly an option and one that I would give more consideration to than usual. Now, of course, he's not the only the only Metro Division player that I think is worth thinking about. We'll talk about one other right winger who might make sense, a little on the expensive side in terms of his cap hit, but in terms of the performance that he brings, he is relatively underappreciated. And this team that is trying to potentially think about a rebuild and maybe selling off some prospects or some of the roster players, they could use a couple of the guys that are currently in Winnipeg's reserve pool. So we'll talk about this player and who might be an option to swap here in just a little bit. Before we go any further, though, I do want to shout out our friends and partners at BetOnline.net. BetOnline is your number one source for all of the sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis you need. You can get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there. They've got everything from football to basketball, soccer, esports, automotive sports, Triple Crown horse racing, you name it, they've got it. And of course, the Winnipeg Jets are certainly accounted for. The entire NHL is, plus minor league and college hockey. So obviously, if you're ready to get into sports betting, BetOnline is a great choice, but they've also got Vegas casino games. And beyond all of that, they've even got sports podcasts, news articles, live league updates. They want to make it, as much of a one-stop shop for all of your sporting needs as humanly possible. If you're ready to get started for, a free account, be sure to register right now at betonline.net on your laptop or mobile device because BetOnline is where the game starts. Hello, friends, and welcome back to this episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets. Thank you for making Locked On Jets your first listen of the day every day. We are taking a look now at some potential trade options for the Jets. I did have a comment I saw from somebody suggesting, Sam Gagner has been slotting in on the first line in place of Nikolai Ehlers and has been doing pretty well. And I think, the first game has been a really big success with him. I think my thing is that even with Ehlers and Gagner in the lineup, I still want a little more scoring punch. I think this team has done a pretty good job so far. But in terms of even strength scoring, you can still tell that they need at least one more shooter who is at least of middle six quality. So I think the Jets can do some pretty good deals here. Hopefully not for a rental, but if they do go for a rental, there are one or two options out there that do intrigue me. And we've got one coming up right now from another Metro Division team, similar to the Washington Capitals, also at the bottom of the Metro Division. But, maybe they have something the Jets could be intrigued by. Before we get into who this player is, though, I wanted to recommend that you make your second listen of the day Locked On Sports Today. From the games that matter to the biggest stories in sports, you can go beyond the scoreboard and behind the scenes with our local experts providing analysis that only Locked On can give you. Be sure to follow and subscribe to Locked On Sports Today on all of your favorite podcasting platforms, including YouTube, Odyssey, Google, Apple, whichever platform is your favorite. Be sure to like, follow, and subscribe right now. It is always free. And again, thank you so much for your support. Now, circling back to the Jets and another Metro Division team that's got a player I think Winnipeg would be interested in, I'm looking at Gustav Nyquist from the Columbus Blue Jackets. Nyquist is one of those perennially underrated two-way wingers with a pretty decent shot that somehow has gone under the radar. I kind of look at him as like a really expensive Sam Gagne, but Gustav just seems to be really good at everything. I don't know what his transition game is going to be like for the Jets, but in terms of like a really creative force inside the offensive zone, who's a solid forechecker, who's got good passing, good vision, and a nice shot, I think he makes a lot of sense. The challenge with him is his cap hit is a little bit on the higher side, so I think the Jets would want them to probably retain, a solid percentage of his contract. I don't know, 30 or 40% would certainly make the cap hit a little bit more manageable and give the Jets some room to add additional help if they want to. What don't the Blue Jackets need, man? You look at this team, and in terms of roster depth, whether it's at forward or on defense, they're hurting. So I think even guys like Logan Stanley or maybe Dylan Sandberg or something would be of interest. Not that I'm really looking to trade Sandberg here at all. I think that would be the last thing I would do when it comes to like a rental in the nature of Nyquist. But I think if you're looking to maybe shed an extra seventh defender or something, plus like a lower round pick or something, maybe the Jets could work out something here for Nyquist. I think he's a very solid rental. I think he could immediately slot into Winnipeg's top nine and do a pretty darn fine job. The Jets could definitely use that scoring help. It would give Winnipeg a lot more balance. And once Ehlers is ready to come back, if he does this season, there's no guarantee of that, but if he does, suddenly the Jets have a really good forward grouping that's got a lot of scoring depth and a lot of skills. So, I think the Jets really couldn't hurt themselves by going after Nyquist. And if they get him on retained salary with the Blue Jackets, I think that would be ideal. Now, still in the Eastern Conference, there's another team that the Jets have apparently been talking to. We've mentioned them before. It's the Ottawa Senators. I'm kind of wondering if Mathieu Joseph is the player the Jets would be targeting on this team, but there is one other guy who would be very much a swing for the fences type, and one that I would be shocked if the Ottawa Senators were really considering trading. That is Alex DeBrincat. Now, I can't for the life of me imagine them trading for or trading away DeBrincat after the Sens just did all of this stuff to acquire him. He's an RFA after this year. Obviously needs a big contract extension, and that'll be a lot of money that the Sens are probably prepared to pay. I certainly would. I think he's a phenomenal player. He's clearly one of the best attackers on this team. But, if they're thinking that maybe he doesn't fit their long-term plan and timeline, perhaps he becomes a little bit more expendable. And if I were the Jets, DeBrincat is the kind of player that I would take Wheeler's cap hit and be devoting more towards Alex. I think DeBrincat at his age, he's 25. He's a phenomenal player. He'll be a phenomenal winger for many years to come. And I think he's exactly the kind of transition attacker that the Jets would love to add to their top six. I think he'd be a brilliant winger, a brilliant attacker, very, skilled in spaces, very elusive, monster shot. If the Jets are going to swing for the fences and bring in a really big top six asset, DeBrincat is my guy. Now, Mathieu Joseph, a little more modest, but I think, you're looking at a guy with like 3 years after this season in terms of contract control at a little under $3 million per season for his cap hit. It's a reasonable hit for a player who will bring some solid top nine finishing, some genuine PK skill, and some solid two-way play, but you're just not really expecting a ton from him. So, does he really move the needle? Probably not. But I think in terms of like giving yourself a quality third liner to pair with someone like Adam Lowry, AJF with Lowry and Joseph as your third line sounds, pretty darn decent. I mean, you could certainly do a lot worse. I think the question then becomes where you start to slot in guys once Ehlers comes back, because, they don't really want to pull Wheeler out of the top six. But I think realistically, Blake's kind of at the stage of his career where I think he would really benefit from bottom 6 minutes, not because he's bad. It's just you can tell at times the 20 minutes or beyond that can be a little rough on him. So even with the reduced minutes this season, it's still been difficult at times to keep up. He has flashes where he looks more like his older form, but other than that, sometimes it's trudging a bit uphill. So DeBrincat or Joseph, obviously really exciting options. DeBrincat a lot more so. Joseph, if you're looking for a solid top nine contributor, and I think the Sens would be looking at like a Neil Pionk maybe a Nate Schmidt. I don't think Schmidt would want to go to the Sens. Pionk would maybe consider it, I guess. But Neil's also really given a prominent role here with the Jets, and I think Winnipeg likes his vibes. So I have a hard time really seeing him going. If the Jets trade DeMello for Joseph or something, I would think that would be a mistake in my opinion. Dylan is one of our best defenders, and I don't know that DeMello would really want to go back to the Sens. But maybe I don't have a great read on the situation. Maybe I could be surprised by things. Either way, I think the Jets would rather focus on futures here, and hopefully if they're swinging for DeBrincat, make it a really good package and make sure that you get every ounce of value with the expectation that DeBrincat is going to be a Jet for a long time. But, obviously the Jets have a couple more options. Some rental players, maybe some guys who still have a little bit of term left. We'll take a look at a couple of players from the Pacific Division and what they can bring to the Jets in just a little bit. Hello, friends, and welcome back to these closing thoughts on tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets. We are pivoting away from the Western or Eastern Conference, swinging back over to the West, looking at the Pacific Division, trying to find some potential top six options for the Jets in terms of skilled attackers who could really boost this team's offense, especially in the top six. And one player that I'm thinking about and that I'm very interested in is Timo Meier. Now, Meier is being paid a pretty handsome salary, and I think that is going to make him almost unmovable, even if the Sharks were remotely interested in it. They very much backloaded this contract. All of the salary is at the end of the deal. Last year, he's being paid $10 million in actual cash. His cap hit's only $6 million, but in terms of real dollars, I think the Jets would basically poop themselves with the notion of paying anywhere near 10 million in salary. That for them would be almost unthinkable. So I think for that reason alone, the Jets wouldn't really be interested in this. If you're spending that much though, and you're looking at Timo Meier's actual production levels, dude's a monster. I mean, you're getting one of the best forwards in the entire league. This guy is a perennial scorer. He's an absolute beast in transition. He's great in the offensive zone. He's effective on the power play, effective at even strength. He basically does whatever you ask of him, and he's a brutal finisher. I mean, this guy punishes the puck. He scores highlight reel goals on the routine. Timo Meier, yeah, if you're spending a lot of money, I mean, you'd really be hard-pressed to find many players who do the sort of job that he can. Now, I think the question with him is, he's essentially a rental, and the Sharks are kind of in a weird spot of certainly in a rebuilding phase, but do they really want to move Meier? I don't really imagine so. I would guess that they've already got a contract extension lined up. Meier himself is probably looking for a pretty handsome payout, something that I think Winnipeg would be a little bit loath to be after, and he's more of a left-sided player than he is a right side, so I don't know if he would necessarily be able to play on his off wing and do so effectively, but if you're looking for a short-term rental that you'd probably have to pay handsomely in both resources and in salary, I guess he could be somebody the Jets explore at the deadline. Probably not the most ideal option, though. One other team that I think might have a better fit for the Jets is Vancouver. This is a team that's definitely open for business and probably looking to make a few deals. If I'm the Jets, I would definitely be after one of Bo Horvat or Connor Garland. Now, Horvat for me is kind of a funny one because he's a short-term rental and, he's punishing a lot of pucks this year. He's finishing out the wazoo, but I just don't know if I believe it's something that's really sustainable. I don't know what his shooting percentage is. It has to be like 20% or something crazy because he's got like 15 goals already, which is pretty nuts. As great of a finisher as he is, I'm not really sure how the rest of his game is. Horvat has always been a player who definitely has elite shooting talent inside the offensive zone and in front of goal. But when it comes to play driving, two-way play, he doesn't really do that. He's less of a creator and more of an elite center finisher, which I think for the Jets would be a certainly useful skill set, and I think he would very much slide into Winnipeg's top six. I just think, with what he's probably going to get at the trade deadline or something, unless he resigns, it might be above Winnipeg's, price point. I think Garland for me makes the most sense. He's a right winger with a great shot. I've talked about him before as being a really pesky, creative player, kind of like Marchand, but in a much more, I would say, top nine style than Marchand's top line sort of performance. Garland has several years left on his deal as well, and his salary is relatively within reason. So if the Jets are potentially interested in a guy who, the Canucks probably can't make great use of, I think he would be a player who could help Winnipeg's window be extended by a couple more seasons. And the salary for the next couple of years, it's like 6, and then 5 million. So it's not cheap, but I think for what he brings and his level of production, he's still very good. I think he's got all of the traits that a coach like Rick Bowness would love. And, already this year he's not had like an amazing scoring pace, but, in the previous seasons, he's generally been very productive. We know that he creates a lot of offensive threat around the goal mouth. My only question with him is like, what is he going to do on a team that's going to be a lot more consistent and more talented than what he's been working with Vancouver. Last year, he had a ton of shots on goal, but he didn't really score very much. So could he become a better finisher for the Jets here? Legitimate question, but my hope is yes. I think he's got all of the traits to be a top six winger at the NHL level. And for the Jets, third liner. Now, bring him in and you put him into your top nine, it gives you three lines that you could probably run reasonably equally. Apologies, folks. It appears we might have had a small connection issue. I was just saying that if you bring Garland in, you probably want to run him around evenly to your other top six players. So, make sure that you get the most value out of him. He is a phenomenal creator. I'd be curious to know, though, what you think of this assortment of players. Let me know in the comments section below who you would be interested in, or if you think the Jets are just going to ride with what they've got. Maybe you have some other players that you'd be interested in from other teams. You want me to do some investigation. I could potentially come up with some, fake trade proposals, different things like that. Be sure to let me know in the comments below or at my social medias at HLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. For tonight's episode, though, that is going to be all the time that we have. Thank you so much for making Locked On Jets your first listen of the day every day. For your next listen, check out the Locked On Sports Today podcast. It helps bring the biggest stories of the day, plus instant reactions, big game recaps, and our famous take of the day. It's available on all of your favorite podcasting platforms, so be sure to like, follow, and subscribe right now. And as always, thank you for listening. Have a great night, and go Jets go.